Welcome to Eyes on Ice. You know, we don't just watch the border, we're all about monitoring the bureaucracy behind it. And today, we've got something. We're breaking down a leaked intelligence brief, and it exposes this quiet, strategic war. But it's not being waged at the border. It's happening on paper, a war to dismantle legal status itself.
So, the brief gives it a name, the pretextual purge. And the core strategy? It's all about erasing the line between what's legal and what's illegal. And get this, it's not about passing new laws. Nope. It's about weaponizing the bureaucracy to go back in time and retroactively invalidate the legal status people have had for years, sometimes even decades.
And the linchpin for this whole strategy is this legal fiction called void ab initio. It's Latin for invalid from the start. So the government isn't arguing that they're stripping your citizenship. Oh no. They're saying that because of some tiny error on a form you filled out 20 years ago, your citizenship was never legally granted in the first place. See? They're just, correcting a little clerical error.
And this isn't just one rogue agency doing its own thing. The brief makes it crystal clear. This is a whole-of-government approach. We're talking about a synchronized effort, a machine with all its parts moving together. Multiple federal departments, all working to turn lawful residents and even naturalized citizens into a deportable class.
So how does it actually work? Well, the brief calls it a pincer movement, and here's the playbook. It all starts small. Step 1. An agency you wouldn't expect, like Health and Human Services, HHS, investigates something like food aid usage. That creates what they call a fraud predicate. It's their legal hook. Then, step 2, that hook lets the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, launch Operation Second Look, and they start digging through all your old immigration files. Step 3, they find one tiny little discrepancy and bam, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, freezes your entire case. And finally, step 4, the Department of Justice, the DOJ, sues you, but not in criminal court, in civil court, where the burden of proof is way, way lower.
Now, this whole process, this whole machine, it hinges on a legal standard called strict liability. And what that means is your intent is completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter what you meant to do. So let's say you forgot to list a 20-year-old speeding ticket on your naturalization form. Under this logic, that's not just an honest mistake. Nope, it's false testimony. And that's all they need to say you lack the good moral character required to be a citizen. The error itself becomes the weapon against you.
Okay, so the brief then lays out several vectors, basically the front lines where this strategy is being deployed right now. And the first one is Vector A, Minnesota. It's become the primary testing ground, the lab for this whole fraud to denaturalization pipeline. And the initial target? The Somali American community. So the public excuse, the pretext, was the feeding our future pandemic fraud scandal. But instead of just going after financial crime, this became the justification to launch a massively expanded Operation Second Look. We're talking about a huge audit of over 700,000 immigrant files with a laser focus on the Somali community.
And this slide, this really shows you the bait and switch perfectly. What the public sees is an investigation into pandemic fraud. But what's happening behind the curtain? Agents are using that as a key to unlock original refugee applications from way back in the 90s and 2000s, and they are combing through them just looking for any contradiction, anything they can slap a label of asylum fraud onto.
And look, this isn't us just connecting the dots. This isn't speculation. The White House came right out and confirmed the strategy. This quote here makes the connection totally explicit. A financial crime investigation is being directly and intentionally linked to the stripping of United States citizenship. It's right there in black and white.
But this strategy isn't just limited to one community. Vector B shows how these same audit mechanisms are being turned against one of the most vulnerable groups you can even imagine, inter-country adoptees, people who grew up their entire lives believing they were Americans. You know, there are an estimated 35,000 to 75,000 individuals out there brought to the U.S. as kids for adoption who are living in this legal gray zone. And the worst part is, many of them don't even know they aren't citizens until it's far, far too late.
So how did this happen? It all comes down to what the brief calls the 1983 anomaly. See, the Child Citizenship Act of 2000 was supposed to fix this. It granted automatic citizenship. But, and this is the killer detail, it wasn't retroactive for anyone who was already over 18. This legislative gap basically created a ghost population. And now, decades-old paperwork errors, mistakes made by adoption agencies, are being weaponized to deport them.
And this is where it gets just tragically ironic. It reveals the cruel paradox of the whole system.
In 2025, South Korea's Truth and Reconciliation Commission did something amazing. They admitted that adoption agencies had fabricated identities for thousands of kids. A huge victory for adoptees seeking justice, right? Well, according to this brief, the U.S. government is now taking that very admission and using it as the evidence of fraud they need to invalidate their status.
All right, the third vector detailed in the brief takes this purge into the academic world. They call it the visa dragnet, and it's been deployed against international students and researchers. It's effectively turning our universities into enforcement arms of the state.
And the scale here is it's staggering. The brief confirms that in a single year between January 2025 and January 2026, over 100,000 F1 and J1 student and exchange visitor visas were revoked. Just gone. But it's the reasons for these revocations, the new triggers, that are the most alarming. We're not talking about failing your classes anymore. Visas are being pulled for social media posts, for activism, for just being adjacent, whatever that means, to a targeted student group. We're talking minor traffic tickets being used to terminate a student's legal status, often without any kind of hearing. Okay, on to the fourth and maybe the most direct vector of all. The brief calls this one manufacturing illegality. And this isn't about digging up old errors. This is about creating a massive undocumented population, literally, with the stroke of a pen.
By terminating what's known as temporary protected status, or TPS, for people from countries like Haiti and Venezuela, the administration instantly stripped legal status and work authorization from 1.5 million people. These are people who have been living and working here legally, in some cases for years.
Now, the official reason they give is that conditions in their home countries have supposedly improved. But that story falls apart when you look at the State Department's own travel advisories. They have level 4 do not travel warnings for those exact same countries, citing things like kidnapping and civil unrest. So, legal yesterday, deportable today. It just doesn't add up.
So when you put all these pieces together, all these vectors, all these bureaucratic tricks, they all point to a single endgame. The brief concludes that the real goal here is to create a state of permanent insecurity for pretty much anyone who wasn't born in this country.
And when you look at the summarized data from the brief laid out like this, the full terrifying picture really emerges. You've got audits of naturalized citizens, revoked student visas, terminated TPS, citizenship oaths getting stalled. Each action hits a different group, but the cumulative impact, it's massive, and it's intentional. And this is the final analysis, directly from the brief itself. The goal is to create a permanent pre-citizen stasis. They have, and I'm quoting, successfully eroded the concept of permanent residence. It means no legal status is ever truly considered final or secure.
The message couldn't be clearer. Your status isn't a right. It's a conditional privilege, and it's perpetually revocable whenever the state decides.
Think about it. If they can undo an adoption from 1980, then no one is safe. Stay vigilant. This is Eyes on Ice.